And hello and welcome to Chicago Newsroom. Ken Davis here. It's great to have you with us on this, our inaugural weekly show here on CAN TV. We're really happy to be here and hope we're going to be around for a good long time. On our first show, well, there's really only one thing to talk about, isn't there? But we're going to sort of veer off from that. Mayor Daley has, what did he do? Did he retired? Is that what he did? I don't know. I don't know what he did. But he did say he's not running anymore, and that's going to upset the apple cart for quite a while to come. And we've got some people to talk about it who really know about this stuff. Karen Lewis is with us. Karen Lewis is with the Chicago Teachers Union, recently elected president, and we're really happy to have you here with us today. Ben Joravsky has been writing about not only the schools, but funding of the city and a lot of other very important stuff for years and years and years in the Reader, and it's just a real delight to have you with us. And Eric Zorn is required by city ordinance to be on every program that inaugurates, whether it's a podcast or anything else. Eric Zorn from the Tribune, who I think it's important to say was one of the first, maybe the first full-time blogger in Chicago. Wouldn't that be right?
Probably the first one from a media outlet.
Yeah,
there were people blogging before I started, but there was no journalists in town were blogging for their publications until I started doing it.
Well, one of the things we're going to do on this show is talk about the press and the media and how it relates to the news of the week. We're certainly going to be talking about the news of the week, but we also want to talk about it through that lens of what it means and how it's covered, and that's changing as much as politics is changing in Chicago. But I guess really, you know, we have this Daley thing sitting on the table with us today, and I guess, Karen, it's a good way to start off by talking about there's no bigger connection with Rich Daley than the connection to the Chicago Public Schools and the bold thing to sort of take over the schools. Does his leaving the scene, is it a bad thing, or is it an opportunity to reset the clock?
I hope so. I hope it's an opportunity to reset the clock. This administration obviously doesn't have any relationship with Daley. So, I mean, I've never spoken to him. He's never called me. I've never called him. But his vision up to this point, I mean, he's had 15 years of school control, and yet people are still complaining about the schools. As far as I'm concerned, then we need to go to the top and look at that. And he's the guy. He is the one making the decisions, calling the shots, putting people, and basically making policy. So,
well, he unilaterally has been putting the CEOs in charge of the schools for the last 15 years. So,
and
I mean,
we
there's no
opened
question.
up the school year without a chief educational officer. I think that is extraordinarily important. I think it says a lot about what this mayor's interest in the schools are, that it is not the educational side, it is the business side.
But if this is an opportunity, and I'm sure a lot of people think a lot of this is opportunity, what is the opportunity? Where does the opportunity come in? How does this change things as far as educational policy? I mean, is it possible to know that without knowing who the next mayor is?
I think it's possible to get some ideas based on who's thrown their hats into the ring. And I think it would be very interesting, and the Chicago Teachers Union certainly looks forward to speaking with as many of these candidates as possible, and hope they will speak to us openly about what their interests are.
What are you hoping to hear from them?
I'm hoping to hear somebody that's interested in education as opposed to interested. And when I say education, I have to be very specific, Eric, because what we have right now is not education. It's a bunch of training. It's a completely unproven system. It's let's just throw something out. I felt that from Duncan on, which is we don't know what to do. Let's just give these school systems over. What we would like to do is see real empowerment, real professional development, real scientific research-based decision making, and that's done by looking at what's going on in the world of education, not in the world of how can we do this for really, really cheap.
Well, so is there a model, a big city school system that's doing it a lot better than us? I'm just asking. I don't follow this that carefully.
You know what? I'll be honest with you. I have been so focused on Chicago right now and what's going on that the things that I've been hearing about, I've only heard about. So to be perfectly honest with you, I haven't done any real studies. I'm not real impressed with what I'm seeing. But what we are looking at is the fact that there has to be a shift from the top down, from the bottom up.
But even in his news conference the other day, Daley was talking about education is first, and it seems like it's a routine thing these days for candidates to say, "I'm going to be the education governor, mayor." Right. They say this, but so you want to hear them say they're interested, but you've got to want to hear more than that, because they'll all tell you that.
No, they're going to say they're interested, but then we need to start now talking about, what is your philosophy? What do you want to see? And how do you think that's going to be done? It's always the devil in the details.
I have to disagree with the central premise of the question to a degree, because I think I'm older than everybody in this room and been watching these things longer. I don't think much has changed really in the Chicago public schools since I came to Chicago. It's a top-down hierarchy. It's always been a top-down hierarchy. It's been it's sort of a quasi-militaristic organization. Where there's this great belief in ritual and protocol and superiors. And so in this regard, whoever is they used to call it a superintendent, now they call it a CEO. Whatever proclamation or ultimatum that person concocts at that moment is going to be followed by how many, 25,000 teachers, 400,000 kids. I've been watching this going back to the days, there was a guy named Joe Hannon in the late 70s, and they went into Angeline Caruso, Ruth Love, et cetera, et cetera. They used to have all these central office curriculum for teaching reading, where everybody would be reading the same thing. I think they called it mastery learning. It was a system by which every kid was supposed to be on the same page at the same time, and that you could guarantee progress by monitoring each step. And so, you watch, if you sit around long enough, you watch mastery learning evolve into high-stakes testing, which was what the Vallis was all about. So you just flunk a bunch of kids for not doing well on a test. It's not even supposed to be a pass-fail test. And then all of a sudden they quietly phase out high-stake testing, probably because they didn't have enough money to send them to summer school, but they concoct some educational excuse for it. So what I'm telling you, Ken, is I think that with Daley and education, it was sort of like whatever whim hit him at the moment. And
let's try this.
Let's try this. The entire system, as just everything else in Chicago, if the mayor says the sun is shining, it could be pouring rain, but everybody says the sun is shining. So in the case of schools, you have 25,000 teachers who are going to trot out and do X, Y, Z.
Well, if I can defend my the question, the thought that occurred to me on the way to our program today is, let's explore that. Is this really an opportunity? I mean, does it really matter? Many of the things you were talking about, Ruth Love, all the way back to Joe Hannon, and many years before that, had nothing to do.
Willis.
Had nothing. Ben Willis, Willis Wagons. This had nothing to do with the mayor, or at least ostensibly, and in many cases didn't have much to do with the mayor. In fact, the mayor wanted nothing to do with it in the past.
Well, that was actually Harold Washington made that declaration that Harold Washington, was going to stay out of education, was not going to put politics into education. In fact, in 1987, there was a very traumatic school strike. I believe it went on for almost 3 weeks. And people were clamoring for Harold Washington to get involved and knock heads or do whatever. And he said, I'm not going to get involved.
Because he learned from Jane Byrne, who had tried to do that before him, and it hadn't really
Well, the pattern had always been a strong, at least always, I mean, going back to old man Mayor Daley, a strong mayor who brings the equivalent of Karen Lewis into a room with the equivalent of Ron Huberman. All right, here's the raise. And
12 hours, 14 hours, 18 hours.
And the equivalent of Karen Lewis went along with it. I don't think the real Karen Lewis would go along with it. But so that's the model that Jane Byrne tried to emulate. You're absolutely correct. Didn't work too well for her because the city was dirt broke. Jane Byrne inherited a city at the, I think, Eric, this is about the time you and I both moved to town. It was like the middle of a recession.
Kind of similar to what we've got now.
Yeah, except it was a different kind of recession. That was the bottoming out of the industrial belt. So like factories shuttering all over the south and west sides. Now we're having a real estate collapse, and this whole city's funded, of course, by real estate taxes, so nobody really knows what the heck to do.
But nevertheless, a similar kind of situation, a mega power a large tree has fallen in the forest, and you are, as has been speculated, you may end up with a series of, interesting but historically rather weak mayors until the next omnipotent mayor
behemoth
comes along.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And until the next Daley is ready or whatever. But you see, that's the whole premise for me is there an opportunity here to rethink, to restructure, to rework the way education works, given the fact that, and Ben, this is your expertise, of course, but I know, Eric, you've written about this too, there appears to be no money. I mean, not only all the things you've written about the money that's literally just being robbed from the schools through TIFs, but also the state owes Board of Education how much money now? I don't even remember. How much is it? $370 million.
Yeah. They're behind.
And they're never going to catch up on that.
Yeah.
And every year it gets worse. I mean, the schools are being treated like police pensions or something, just sort of something you don't have to really fund.
Yeah, no, I got to tell you, it is pretty bleak in terms of the budget. And the real problem is, in my humble opinion, is that there's so much fiction mixed up with the fact. So there's really no accurate accounting. It's so much of it is political posturing. So I believe that most of the budget numbers that have been thrown out have been an attempt by this administration to knock some sense into the Chicago Teachers Union to get them to make concessions that Karen Lewis can speak for herself. They're not going to make, at least unless they're forced to. And they haven't blinked yet. So yes, there's a budget crisis. The actual extent of it, I don't know. But you're absolutely right. It limits the amount of experimentation that any mayor.
So what kind of person are we looking for then to take over here? Do you want somebody who is an ideologue, or do you want somebody who has this sort of the CEO style core competency, who can really see what's going on with these numbers and really make the tough decisions? I mean, I feel like out there's a whole bunch of people who have these like ideas, like I'm going to run this, I'm going to, and I've just been hearing this flood of platitudes the last few days, and even when I hear Karen say, I want to hear someone say that they care about education, you're going to hear all that. I mean, people are just going to be saying whatever they think people want to hear, but what kind of person is going to be able to step in here and run this amazing,
don't ask the
huge,
question.
troubled
answer
corporation?
the question. I know you were talking about this on your Prickly Pear podcast.
Well, I'm disillusioned by what happened with Pat Quinn, who I've always had a high regard for Pat, and I feel like he, as a guy who I feel is honest and committed to a lot of good things. He got into office, and I feel like he just didn't know how to run things. He didn't know how to be a leader. And for all of Daley's faults, and I certainly tip my hat to Ben and his coverage of that, and he was a strong leader in the sense that you don't have the kind of fractious dysfunction that you have in Springfield down in City Hall. You have a different kind of dysfunction, but so I'm wary of people who are some of these fresh aldermen, like been in for a couple of years, and they think they know how to run the city. I don't think they do, and I don't care. And now, I mean, I think I in previous years I would have been a little bit more open to someone who's just like, he's just got good ideas. She's just got good ideas. I like their ideas, but I don't know if this is the time for idea people.
Well, I think that's a scary. I think it's really scary. The unknown always is. I think that we have to be extraordinarily careful, because here's what happens. This city has a bureaucracy that runs itself in a way. We have to be honest about that. We have a bureaucracy. We have people that have been working in city government and doing things for an awfully long time. Okay. So the person who's actually the titular head then either will put his or her people into the top spots there and hope that they can control and manage. All right. So the key is, let's not fool ourselves to thinking that somebody's going to come in and everything's going to change overnight, because it's not. I mean, I even look at the fact that the Chicago Teachers Union is run by staff. It's run by staff, and the majority of the staff was there when we got there. So yes, there's Karen Lewis, there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak, but the actual ship of state is a big bureaucracy that moves, and the same with Chicago. It's not like, we're going to have like some cataclysmic
One that I think it has to be pointed out, in 21 years, Daley never really got a handle on himself in so many ways. I mean, you're exactly right that the Department of Transportation, Streets and Sand, these are cities within themselves. They're, tens of thousands of employees, and imposing policy on them is not an easy thing to do.
Well, I actually view Daley, we're keeping the subject on education. First of all, Daley named the head of the schools when he came in 1989. So it wasn't as though in 1995 the world suddenly changed and Daley got involved in education. He had named the previous superintendents. There was a whole convoluted process, of course, that governed that he had to work with. He got annoyed with it. And I view what happened. I view Daley as a power politician, a shrewd one, and it was this attempt essentially to gather more control, to take control of the public schools. I don't think he did it out of benevolent interest in education. So I don't even. I think Eric has a good point. I don't think Daley had an ideology about education. I feel as though
he just wanted it better. He just wanted to be able to, as a selling
fix it.
Fix it.
I'm going to disagree with you guys. I think he wanted control.
Yeah, control.
I don't think it was like fix it. I mean, what's to fix? It's control. What has he fixed? I mean, literally, we were talking before we came on the air, like, where do you send your kid to school? Yeah. What has changed? Been having conversations with parents on this very subject. Where do you send your kids to public school?
Well,
since I moved to Chicago in 1982, I really don't know how much has changed. Again, you have different ultimatums by people in charge. Yeah. Teachers have to wear green shirts instead of red shirts. They have to teach this book instead of that book. But ultimately, what has changed? Middle-class parents, middle-class white parents struggling where they're going to send their kids to school. Middle-class black parents, where am I going to send my kids to school? So seriously, what has changed? What has significantly changed in the way the public schools operate in the city of Chicago?
Maybe we're saying the same thing, but in a slightly different way, because my view of it has always been that he took control of the schools so that he could say to those middle-class parents, don't worry about it, it's getting fixed. The schools are going to be okay, you don't have to leave. That was really the only thing.
That is an excellent point, because one of the first things he did was he built Walter Payton High School.
Right.
And he built, they called it Chico High,
Northside College.
Northside College, probably always get the name mixed up because there's the North Shore Country Day School. And then he took that perfectly fine, I'm still haven't forgiven him for this, Ken. He took that great clerical school, Jones Commercial, and he turned that into Jones, and they still don't have a home for it. They still haven't gotten their gym together. What a huge real estate.
No, they got another school.
No, I know. Now they're going to move the thing over to where Cabrini Green used to be. So the thing is like, you're absolutely correct. He should be given credit for that, because from a shrewd political move, it reassured large chunks of voters that he's looking out for them. And so in their minds, he gets his notion. He fixed the schools because he created a school where their really smart kid could go, right? So
that was all about keeping the middle class in Chicago, right? I mean, there were people who just were planning to leave, and I came to
but that's been going on for decades. My high school was built for that. Kenwood was built to keep middle-class parents coming into the Chicago public schools because they didn't want to send their kids to Hyde Park.
People looked
in the 60s.
People looked at families like Ben's family and mine, and we have kids roughly the same age, his are a tiny bit older, or whatever. I've got a kid in college, and Ben's got two in college, but they looked at families like ours back in the 80s who stayed in the city as pioneers almost, because that was before there were all these options. And I think Ben is right that what Daley did was he said, okay, look, I'm going to create this school and this school and this school, so you don't have to leave. And so suddenly we weren't pioneers anymore.
But
we were just
other
opportunists.
parents are leaving that look like you guys because they're saying, I don't want to have to go through all these hoops. I mean, I talked to a woman who moved to Oak Park years ago because she didn't want to she wanted her children to go to public school, but she didn't want to have to go through this maze of craziness that Daley and the madness
and the anxiety
and all
is
this
ratcheting up year by year. It's getting harder to get into these schools because there aren't enough of them.
Because there aren't enough of them.
And then there's the anxiety of, are there going to be enough teachers? Are they going to pull out the teachers? Are they going to expand your class size from 35 to from 30 to 37? And this is what I'm getting at. Then I don't see how much has significantly changed.
Aside from the illusion, or not illusion, but this sort of layer of choice that's put on top.
Well, first of all, there were choices. Again, I have to disagree with you guys a little bit. I believe that even when I moved to Chicago, there were choices. And again, I'm looking at it as a middle-class white person. I don't want my kid going to an all-black school. So what I have to do, and this is how people basically think, this is how white people think.
Thanks for that.
You know, just for the
Just in
viewers
case
out
you
there,
hadn't
just in
known
case
that.
you know it. You're like,
Ben Joravsky
okay,
will let you know.
where can I send my kid so that he or she won't be the only white kid in the class? And then as a parent, as a white person, you have to overcome a lot yourself. Like, I'm going to be the only white parent dealing with a bunch of black parents. It's like a whole social construct thing you have to deal with. You understand what I'm saying? That goes on in the minds of parents.
And Mayor Daley knew that.
Mayor Daley knew that.
Mayor Daley absolutely knew that.
Yeah, he absolutely.
As
he
any
knew that.
good politician.
But no one ever says it,
Right.
except for me. But
Yeah.
you know, and
Now
so,
you've got it out there on the
now
table.
it's out there, and no one will invite me to parties.
All right,
that
Karen.
they don't invite me to anyway.
Karen, fix this for us.
Yeah.
We're wandering
Yeah.
here. What do you want to happen?
Wow. What I would like to happen is for there to be a completely different mindset about teachers and teaching. And the fact that those of us that are passionate about this profession treat it as such. And I think the problem is that in a desire for a quick fix, we have bought a lot of snake oil. The whole idea that, oh, these numbers are going to make people better. What I have seen over my 22 years in the classroom is that my students feel awful about themselves because I don't test well. I hear this constantly. And I'm looking at kids who are really bright and really sharp and have a lot of stuff going on for them. But because they don't test well, they weren't at the school they would like to go to.
Right. And that's a stigma all of its own.
And then there's a stigma all of itself. And then that trickles down into the classroom where I said, okay, but we have to get past this. We have to get past this, your feeling about this. So it's a tough battle. And teachers now have to do way more than just teach content. You know, we have to be psychologists and social workers and counselors and all these kinds of things, and truant officers. Jobs that used to exist don't exist anymore, but it's all our responsibility. We've taken it and we've said, okay, we'll take it, but treat us like the professionals that we are.
So if a new mayor came in and appointed a new CEO, would you want it to be a Ron Huberman kind of management guru kind of guy, or would you want it to be an education person? Or what about the idea that you kind of need both? You need two people.
Well, they have two jobs, don't they?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so there needs to be somebody in charge of the education piece and somebody in charge of just sort of like making the budget work.
But that's the person that needs to be behind the scenes. All I'm saying is that
they've got it backwards, is what you're saying.
Exactly. The CEO person needs to be back in their office doing their arithmetic. The rest of us need to deal with the chief education officer. That should be the important job, because that's what this is about.
So it's gotten turned inside out.
Can I bring this conversation a little bit more to
Yeah.
media things? Karen, what sort of stories do you think that Chicago media are not covering about education? What stories aren't we telling? Should we be telling? Don't you know? It's not my beat, but I'm interested in it.
Here's one of the problems that we have with media in Chicago. I think, quite frankly, is that it's so corporate mentality too, and they have picked up on the so-called bad teacher line. This is sexy to them. This is selling papers, and people are wanting to point fingers.
Got to get rid of those bad teachers.
Yeah, because that's going to make the difference. Everybody's bought. This is the newest line. It's garbage. What the media aren't getting at is the fact that we don't want to have real discussions about longitudinal poverty in this city. We don't want to do that because it's a lot easier to talk about Millennium Park and all the beautiful flowers in the middle of the boulevards and how gorgeous Chicago is and all the beautiful things. But when we don't want to address the fact that we have communities that have absolutely no creation of jobs, new jobs in those areas, we don't have for instance, the Google, the Yahoo, or whatever, building campuses in Austin or Roseland or Inglewood. So we also don't have this whole layer of children seeing success and people understanding what success really means. So the fact is that for some reason we've got this idea that education happens in a vacuum, and it does not. So that's why we're working with community organizations and parents to take this to the next level.
Do you have a mayor candidate?
No.
Okay. You know what? We're down to like our last 2 minutes here, and I just
closing statements already?
No, yes, and now it's time for closing statements here on Chicago Newsroom. Eric, I can't let this go without you talking about the thing you mentioned this morning in the blog about petitions. We got to talk about the mayor thing just a little bit. This is completely different. The world's different. Mark Brown wrote a very interesting piece about it yesterday. I mean, this is a runoff, and the top two are the ones who get to run for mayor. So the big, there's a big fight in the primary. But you wrote something very interesting about petitions.
Well, just that every voter is allowed to sign one mayoral petition, and the first one you sign, we can sign as many as you want, but only the first one counts technically. So that when Alderman Wagaspack or whatever comes up your street, or Alan wants you to sign his petition, and you say, "Oh, no, I'll sign," that's your signature. You can't sign another one, and that means that anyone who's sitting around waiting, like Rahm Emanuel playing Hamlet, there's no time to wait here.
Yeah.
I mean, and Miguel de Valle getting out there saying that if he starts passing petitions, he comes up your street and he's locked in your street, and the more petitions some of these early people get, the more they're going to be able to close out some of this. I don't think that we're going to have, how many faces were there in the Tribune yesterday? 25 in that one page. We're not going to have 25 candidids because they're not going to be able to get their act together. But remember, Scott Lee Cohen got enough signatures to get on the ballot. So
that's right.
So if you're aggressive and get out there.
Well, it's probably easier because it's statewide. Wait, how many signatures is it? 12,500 or is it 20?
It's 12,500.
12,500. So that's there was a law that was proposed. It was buried out of the outcry. They were going to increase the number of aldermanic signatures that you needed, and they were going to codify in state law the notion that you can only sign, it's first come, first serve, that kind of thing. So exactly what you're talking about, which was pretty much geared to protect the incumbency of one particular alderman, Patrick LeVar, in the 45th Ward. It's kind of funny the way our system works.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, but that's a good point, Eric. It's like if someone really wanted to be slick, they just go out and get 1 million signatures.
That's the thing. If you could get out there today, you'd be. You know what? We're pretty much out of time here. I want to thank Eric Zorn, columnist, of course, for the Chicago Tribune, and blogger extraordinaire, man about town, rock on tour, and general purpose talk show host, and we're very happy to have him here. And of course, Ben Joravsky from The Reader, been doing exemplary work, a body of work, I must say, a lifetime of it, and we're really grateful to have you both here on the show today. And of course, Karen Lewis, the CEO of...
CEO!
I knew I would get through it without that. And of course, Karen Lewis, who presides over and is president of the Chicago Teachers Union, brand new, just in job, and we're really happy to have them all here today. And I hope you'll all come back because this conversation will go on and on and on. You have been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV. And of course, you can find us here on cable, 6:30 Thursday nights. Remember, every Thursday night. But you can also get us online anytime, blip.tv. Blip.tv. Yeah, it's Blip TV, CAN TV. And you can get it on iTunes, too. So I'm Ken Davis saying thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.